The question then for us, I think, as we read through this is, who is this successor that is being told of that is going to follow after David? When we look at the promises, what is the house that we are talking about that God is going to build for David? David is like, I want to build God a house. What kind of house? It's going to be a house of cedar. So God says to David, I will build you a house. Are you going to build me a house? He goes, I will build you a house. Well, what kind of house is that's going to be built? Is it going to be a house of cedar? Is it going to be a house of brick and mortar? Is this what God is talking about? We know that just the very next life, like David is having a desire to build a place for God, Solomon will build a temple. That temple will be destroyed. The temple is destroyed within 500 years by the Babylonians. Well, what happens? The temple is rebuilt. Temple is rebuilt in the time of Herod the Great. What happens after Herod the Great? After Jesus comes, 70 AD, the temple is destroyed. Is this what God is talking about? Is God talking about a kingdom that is going to be eternal from the line of David? Is he talking about Solomon here? Is Solomon eternal? Is his kingdom one that lasts forever? We have these promises that God gives, and we are like, well, where is this played out? Where do we see this happen? If God is talking about something that is eternal, is this what he's talking about? Listen to the 5 promises that come from here. This is known as the Davidic covenant. This is the covenant that God makes with David. And follow closely along. In verse 9, he promises that he's going to make David's name great. He then says this. He says, I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men on the earth. We know who David is. Everyone here knows who David is. We have a promise here that there's going to be rest and peace, right? On your own, they'll be no longer disturbed. Your enemies, the wicked people, will not oppress anymore. The third promise happens in verse 12. We see that this building of this home will be done in the name of God. That after he rests with his fathers, there will be offspring, but it will be from his body. And it says here that I, God, will establish this kingdom. It will be God who establishes this kingdom. The promise is that it will be an everlasting kingdom in verse 13. He is the one who will build this house for me, one of David's offspring, for my name. For whose name? For the name of God. And I will establish the throne of his kingdom for how long? Forever, for all of eternity. And then verse 15, it talks about how this is unconditional. But my love will never be taken away from him, as he took it away from Saul. It will be never removed from him. All 5 of these promises are not fulfilled in Old Testament time. They are not. Those 5 promises are not fulfilled in Old Testament time. The nation of Israel ceases to exist after a point. So what is he talking about? One of the greatest promises that eludes us, or that gives us an idea of what kind of house it is that God is going to build, is the fact that it is a house that is eternal. It is an eternal house. Well, what kind of house is he speaking of? Who is this that is going to rule? Does anyone have any idea who this possibly could be? Because if you're going to have an eternal kingdom, guess what you need? You need an eternal king. Isaiah shares for us, gives us a sign. He says it will be one who is born of a virgin in Isaiah 7. Isaiah 9 describes his kingdom like this. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor. He will be known, this leader, as Mighty God. He'll be known as Everlasting Father, and he will be known as the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. He will reign, where? On David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness. Holds it up with righteousness and justice. For how long? From this time, or from that time on, until forever. How is this going to be accomplished? The Lord is going to accomplish it. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Who could this possibly be? That is the statement is given. The promises are given. The prophecy is given by Isaiah. The fulfillment of this happens in Luke 1.